Huskers.
Has come back to
Dublin, Ireland.
Huskers versus Northwestern in Dublin. I want to ask you, not only what do you think is going to happen, but how important is this game for the Huskers?
It's important because you're opening up with a Big Ten game, again, just like last year's game was. But I think it's more telling than important. You know what I mean? Like, I think we're going to see a lot of how far along all this new talent and these new coaches and these tweaks and changes to the systems is actually in motion. You know what I mean? Like how well it's already starting to run, or if it's going to take a while to get things going. I'm equally unconfident, or not confident, whatever the right words are, that we're going to come out and look like what a lot of the optimistic people are thinking the team's going to look like by the end of the year. But I'm also not 100% convinced that we're going to look like a team that has a bunch of new players and new coaches and tweaks to the system. Like, does that make sense? If we blow out Northwestern, I'm not going to be convinced that we're going to go beat Oklahoma. But if we eke out a win, or they eke out a win over us, I'm not convinced the season's shot either. I really wish we could redo all the preview videos, the schedule prediction, everything like that after this game, you know, if not after a couple games. I think it's going to take a little bit for things to get going in full swing. But if they come out and already look like there's some good momentum, you know, I just think that this game is going to kind of tell a lot. It's going to set my expectation level based on, like, this is going to create a base point for me to decide, okay, like, they're way better than I anticipated, and if they can improve on this and gel together as the season goes, we're going to be really good. And I'll start leaning more towards those people who think we have even the slightest shot of competing for the West, let alone the Big Ten, or thinking I can see it's there. Once it starts clicking, it could be like other years where we kind of build steam as we go, even though we're losing close games. But when you're playing the upper echelon of the conference, which is our second half of the season, like, okay, I can see us being closer to that level at that point, or looking like, man, we're going to need these next two gimme games to really get stuff together now that they're not playing against themselves in the same defense every day in practice.
Gary, what does everybody say about Northwestern? What's the trope? The whole even year, odd year thing.
Odd even, yeah. Feast or famine.
How much stock do you put in the fact that for whatever reason, it seems like on the even years, they have great seasons, and on the odd years, they don't?
Honestly, none.
It's superstition.
Like, I feel like it is. There's, from a gambling perspective, which I know we haven't gotten to that much on this channel, but I'm obviously pretty deep in the woods on the gambling side. You're always looking for trends and things like that, and that jumps out at people. But people conveniently take a 4-year window and go, hey, look what's happened. You could take that same 4-year window for Nebraska and argue that we've regressed, right? So unless someone's saying, okay, we're going to read the trends and Northwestern's going to win the West this year, you kind of have to also handcuff together, and Nebraska's only going to get 2 wins this year. You know what I mean? Like, you kind of can't have one without the other if you're going to read that much into trends. It doesn't mean much for me. It's something to talk about, and it's a thing that's happened recent. So it's kind of a recency bias, in my opinion, that's easy to hold on to. But I mean, that's not the long-term Pat Fitzgerald's trend. You know what I mean? It hasn't since he's been there, on off kind of thing. It's just been the last 4 years. They've had quarterback deals, they've had injuries, they've had different turnover in the defensive coordinator spots and other coaching areas. So, I mean, there's tons of things, you know, we could probably spend a ton of time on a video just on that, trying to break down why they're good or why they're bad. The schedule changes every other year on who teams play on the other side of the division or the conference. So, but
it is interesting. I mean, they can go from being absolutely terrible to, on an even year, winning the Big Ten West 2 out of the last 4 years. Yeah. And this just so happens to be, I mean, I'm not that superstitious. I'm a little stitious. But what I find interesting is that people leave out the 5th year. They only go for the last 4 years. But if you look at the last 5 years, 2017, they were killers. They went 9-3, 10-3 if you consider the bowl win.
This time of year when there's nothing else to talk about, that's why I'm so happy there's finally going to be a game. I mean, how much stuff have you and I covered? And we still constantly say we don't know because we have to see stuff. So it's going to be nice to finally see something. I mean, I don't believe in curses and jinxes and omens and things like that. So, I mean, odd year, even year, whatever, man. I mean, you don't have to go too far to break that cycle or break that trend. It's if anything, it shows great inconsistency on their part. And again, I go back to Nebraska has consistently been bad more than they've every other year been good or bad. So I don't know. I just don't put anything into that, man. I'm just looking at the talent on the field. Nebraska obviously has a lot more talent. Frost is in a much more dire situation than any of their coaches. It's just going to have to play out. And I don't think what the past has happened or previous years or every other year is going to have a whole lot to factor into it.
Speaking of coach, Pat Fitzgerald, man, I want Frost to coach here forever. It's my desire that he end up old like Osborne as a Husker coach. I don't want to see him go anywhere. However, if it does happen, Pat Fitzgerald is on my top 3 list. Wow. Because of what he has been able to squeeze out of so little, no offense, Northwestern. It's just that they have restrictions. They're going to have restrictions on the NIL player, like deals that they can get for their players, but they're just a smaller school. For him to get out of his talent what he does, it's very incredible. It doesn't have to be the Huskers. I would love him to coach the Bears someday. I've always liked him. What do you think about Pat? I call him Pat. We're on a personal level.
Yeah, I've heard him mention you quite a few times in press conferences, but there's no denying how good of a coach he is. It's just, I don't know, man. You get coaches that are at smaller schools or even FCS type schools. And I mean, take Frost, for example. He looked like a really, really good coach at Central Florida, moves up to the big leagues, and I think a lot more of that has to do with the culture that Nebraska had at the time. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely worse coaches that could come in and replace him if and when he needs to be replaced.
I didn't want to make it about replacing Frost. It's just I really admire the guy.
Yeah, I get it. And I mean, I could see him going either way. I could see him being like a Saban or a Myers who goes from a small school up to all of a sudden competing for titles. When, like you're saying, when you give him more talent, when you give him more resources, or you give him whatever, a bigger stage. And I could also see him being one of those guys that you move him up to that, like a Lane Kiffin type. When he goes to these smaller schools, he seems to do pretty well. You put him at USC, or was he at Tennessee, or did he not last Tennessee? Whatever it was. But I mean, you get the other side of that spectrum, and it's like when the expectations are low, and Northwestern is typically a prototypical Big Ten team under his coaching. You know what I mean? Like run heavy, big, tough offensive lines, good solid defenses with solid linebackers that can run stop, which is huge in the Big Ten. I don't know, man, when you get to a bigger school, and I mean, obviously, yeah, if you stay in the Big Ten, not a whole lot changes, but you get on a bigger stage and you're competing more with the Ohio States and schools like that. I don't know how well that translates. When you look at, we just talked about, he competed for 2 Big Ten titles, and Ohio State smacked them both times, and beyond that, some of the bigger bowl games, there haven't really been bigger bowl games for him, but you know what I'm saying? Bigger teams, different styles, things like that. It's kind of a 50-50 hodgepodge result. So I don't know, man. It'd be interesting to see. I think it'd be cool to see him get the opportunity, whether it was Nebraska. Like I wouldn't even really consider that, honestly, until the time came, but just anywhere to see what a guy like that could do with more talent and more resources.
One thing I wanted to bring up is Ryan Helinski. I watched one of his interviews, and the kid has lost weight on purpose. He said this is the first time in his career he's taking his body seriously. He's shrunk down, man. He looks super fit. He looks really slim. And he said that last year, the drills they were doing, he's huffing and puffing, dying out there. He said this year he feels like he's barely breaking a sweat. Like he doesn't even lose his wind. And he said he did that specifically because he knew he needed to be able to be more of a dual threat. Most people think of him as just absolutely not a dual threat. I'm just saying, look out for that. His new dedication to his body could translate into him slipping out of the pocket a little more than... I mean, I'm sure that Frost knows this. I'm sure they're up on the scouting. They probably know he's going to try to move a little bit more. But I don't think this is going to be the same Ryan Helinski that we saw last year.
That's another thing that every year you hear. I mean, you hear it with Nebraska. You heard it with Yant this year. You heard it with Martinez a couple years ago. A guy gained a bunch of weight, or he lost a bunch of weight, or he had gained it the year before and he felt like it slowed him down, so he lost some. So he felt like he was too small and he was beat up or whatever. Like, especially in a quarterback, like is any of that going to help him make better decisions and not turn the ball over? Is that going to help him read RPOs better? Maybe from a confidence level, the answer is yes. I don't know, but to me, it comes down to offensive line play, both sides. If Nebraska can do what we've heard all spring and summer, they're super aggressive. Rail is working them so hard that Frost has thought about telling them to dial it down, because by the time they're done with individual drills, they're exhausted for team drills. If they can move the line of scrimmage and we can run the ball, because I don't think the offensive game, I don't think you're going to see what you saw with Pittsburgh last year, like a lot of people are thinking. I don't think Casey Thompson's going to come out and look like a Heisman Trophy candidate by throwing the ball around the yard, just because the system's new, he's new, the center's new. But I think it's going to come down to run game. Their line is good. You know, they've got the best tackle in the country, basically. Both of their tackles are good. We supposedly have this great pass rush. We're going to be worried about the running backs being healthy and them running on us. I think there's going to be a lot of guys in the box. I think the guys on the edge are going to try and do everything they can to contain the pocket. I'm not really worried about the quarterback running. I don't feel like there's this big threat from their receivers. You know, if we were opening up against Oklahoma or Michigan or something like that, I'd be a little more worried about not the depth as far as players goes, but the levels of defense, like all three levels clicking and working together, whether it's run, pass, or RPOs. You know what I'm saying? I think with Northwestern, it's going to be very run heavy. The defense is going to be very focused on that. I think you can leave the DBs in man for the most part, unless for some reason they get loose on that and start picking things apart. I think it's just going to come down to a more gritty, traditional Big Ten style game with both teams trying to run the ball, and whoever can kind of win that battle is how the game is going to go. I don't think a quarterback gaining or losing weight is going to make a bunch of difference. Like I said, I don't think with everything being so new, Casey Thompson's going to come out and steal the show. Could be wrong, but I mean, just as kind of my assumptions.
We ran it down their throats last year. So, but we have a new OC with Whipple, so who knows if he's going to be likely to do that again. That brings me to the predictions, and I know we both have the Huskers winning this game. I want to say that, so we beat them by what, like 7 touchdowns last year?
Something crazy. It was 50-something.
So I think that given that it's an even year, and I'm a little stitious, and it's in Ireland, so there's going to be perhaps more difficulty with communication. I don't know. You know that there's going to be issues with being in Ireland, whatever it is, jet lag. You get the idea. I think that shrinks the 7 touchdown lead to maybe like a 2-3 touchdown lead window for a win, and I'm fine with that.
So you think they covered the 12.5?
Well, really all that I'm worried about is their running backs. But I think that our defense is so good, man. I think especially stopping the run. Not only are we super talented at stopping the run, but these guys, they did it last year. They have the confidence. They have the continuity. This isn't like, well, we've got a lot of talent. Hopefully they can No, I've already seen them do it. So I expect them to do it even better this time.
I agree, man, on the defensive side. The defensive side of the ball, to me, is what I feel a lot of people, not to like put you on the spot, but you included, think of the whole team. They see these guys coming in, these names and this and that, and get excited and think, well, last year we were a possession away from winning every game. But the problem is you don't have the same offense. You know what I mean? Your top 2 receivers are gone. Your quarterback is gone. Hopefully your offensive line's better, but you didn't bring in a bunch of stud transfers on the offensive line, where I would argue you should have instead of skill positions. We've had guys at the skill positions that don't get involved because the line play has been so bad. So, I mean, the great unknown is the offense. The defense, to me, is you're returning the gist of your core defense that kept you in those games, that allowed you to be 1 possession away from each game. And then you add a stud like Mathis on the edge. Like, yes, the DBs are going to be young and things like that, but they're athletic. You've got guys coming back that have been there. It's not the overhaul and the big change. You don't have a lot of system change with new coaches and new system on the defensive side of the ball. That's why I said when it comes to the running side, if you throw guys in the box, let the DBs play man, let a safety come over the top in case somebody, busts through a hole or cuts back in the backfield and goes to spring a long one. Other than that, I really don't worry about their passing game. I think if we can run the ball, we win it. I don't think that's going to be an issue. I don't see a blowout like last year. I don't even think they're going to cover the 12.5, but
wow,
I do think they'll win. I think it's going to be it might not feel like it's real close, but I think the final score is going to be closer than what a lot of people expect.
You want to take a stab at a score?
I would say them 13-20. I don't know if they score 2 touchdowns. I think they'll get 1 at least. I would say maybe 13-20 for them, and I would say, 28-31, something like that for Nebraska.
I'm thinking 35-14 us.
I hope you're right. So you don't see any field goals.
Don't get caught up on field goals.
I think you're going to have some drives as the field shortens and the defense doesn't have as much ground to cover, and they can stack the box a little better. Some of the drives stall out, and you try to see what you got in your new kickers. But I don't know, man. Could be wrong. Could be a blowout like last year. But I'm saying Nebraska wins between 8 to 10 points, 7 to 10 points, something like that when it's said and done. Do you think it's more likely that our offense goes the entire game without a turnover, without an interception or a fumble, or we have a big special teams play, either a big kick return, punt return, don't necessarily have to be touchdowns, but something blows up? Like, what do you think, which one do you think will show greater improvement, the ball security on the offense or the special teams play?
I think we need both of them to improve, obviously. I think both of them are equally important, but as far as which one I think will happen first, I think a big play, a big return play.
I expect the offense to be more clean. I don't expect it to click and be firing on all cylinders and light them up. That's why I kind of predict the score I predict. But I don't think, Casey Thompson could throw an interception. If we run the ball 40 times, 30 some times, there could easily be a fumble. But I'm saying I would expect that more than a big special teams play. However, I expect the special teams now, like my baseline for the special teams is hitting field goals that should be hit, not punting to the wrong side of the field, not botching kickoffs that turn into, or kick returns that turn into safeties. You know what I mean? So like, I think the special teams will be efficient, and it'll be a great improvement from last year, but I don't know that we're at that point yet. It would be so sweet to see Palmer or Tommy Hill or somebody crack one and go loose. I would be so happy.
The way some of these guys talk about Trey Palmer's speed, it makes me think that he's going to break once, at some point.
That'd be nice, man. All right, so assuming one happens, what's more likely, that Nelson and Mathis combined have more sacks, or the entire backfield, the entire DB unit has more interceptions this game?
Considering you wouldn't expect them to throw multiple picks because they're not going to throw a whole bunch, I got to go with sacks.
Sacks. I think I agree. Running game. Who wins the running game battle? Their stable of backs or our stable of backs? Leave the quarterbacks out. You got to take the quarterback rushing yards out of it. I'm saying just line up running the football. At the end of the game, you add up all of our backs yards, all of their backs yards. Who wins the rushing game?
I think we're going to go up, and so we're going to have time of possession on our side. And at some point, they're going to have to start throwing the ball to catch up. So that's going to cut into their running. Although they have great running backs. What do you think?
Really good. I thought that the reason I came up with these questions is because I was thinking of different ways, different things we need to do to win. I was thinking we need a big special teams player. We at least have to be solid, or we need to be clean on the turnover game. And I was thinking on the defensive side, if they're going to run a lot, we have to make sure when they pass that it just doesn't work, whether that's by getting to the quarterback or getting to the quarterback enough to force turnovers. Now I was thinking about, we got to win the rushing battle because both teams are going to run a lot based on my theory of how the game's going to go. But I can also see them overselling on our run game and us having a handful of pass plays that could be short dump offs, quick crosses or slants. Frost loves running that mesh route, those mesh routes. I could see us springing some big pass plays that stretch the field to a point where, it's just taking yards away from what would have been ran if the ball, you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense? Plus, yeah. I think their offensive line is better. I'm going to have to be shown that our offensive line has improved. I'm tired of hearing every year that it's getting better and then it's not. So, I'm not confident that we're going to be able to just smash mouth, run when we need to, and gap out and run when we need to. It's going to come down to that. So, I would say they have the better offensive line. They have stud backs. Hopefully we have a greatly improved offensive line, but I would say them if I had to bet on the running game. I wouldn't be surprised if Casey Thompson has a decent chunk of running yards. So that's the other factor. I think he'll take a few carries himself. So whether they're designed or not, I think it'll be both. I think there'll be some design ones. Some will just have to take off. But so to answer the questions I asked you, clean turnovers, no interceptions, no fumbles on our end, which is kind of stupid after getting done saying we got a new quarterback, a new center, new kind of system, things like that. But I would say that over a big, really good special teams play. I would say the sacks on the defensive side, and I would say Northwestern will probably win the rushing yards as far as running backs goes. But I think we'll mix it up just enough that we'll still win the game.
Make sure you have your notifications turned on for the channel. We're going to be live after the game on Saturday. We originally did post-game shows, and we're going to get back to that this season. We'll give our takes after the game, but then we're going to turn it over to the chat and really try to talk with you guys and figure out what you guys think went right or wrong. Saturday cannot come fast enough, Gary. We'll see you guys Saturday. Go Skurs.